Welcome back, everybody. Hope you learned a little bit about TING. Remind you, if you want to learn more or want to check things out, go to bttv.ting.com. We're in a fresh new best of 5, this time a PVZ. In the bottom right, as the pink Protoss, he is Goblin. In the top left, as the red Zerg, it's Psystorm's Zanster. And you just send that tweet out. There you go. Alright, so ZvP, so a lot of Zergs left. Sort of wait till the losers round, and Denver in the winners. Some people saying they don't know who Denver is. Surprised they took out sort of 3-0. I still think it's a surprise that it was 3-0. Maybe even a 3-1 would have been more understandable. But Denver is definitely a good Zerg player. That is going to, I think, be known by everyone shortly. Soon enough. Plays in a lot of underdogs. He is a French Zerg. And we're pretty glad to have him continue to show in dominance, I guess, in some of these either online weekly tournaments or in the TING Open group. But he's got some competition. Obviously, sort of. He was very comfortable in ZvZ, so that 3-0, while still a surprise, might have just been his matchup. We'll have to face a guy named Goblin, potentially, here. Depending on this series goes, Goblin can be a bit of a cheesy Protoss. You can definitely get Protossed, I suppose. Or Zanster. And Zanster, I think, is who people are expecting to get out first, if he's in good form. He seems to be getting better and better. He just recently, I think, got out of school maybe a couple months ago, committed full time to StarCraft, and that was something that was missing for a lot of other tournaments he played in, was that, you know, he would school early that morning or something like that. So now that he's full time, really focusing, he seems to be getting those results, actually being consistent, which was missing. You know, he'd have certain, you know, highlights, right, like in Montreal, but then would immediately dip out right after. And Montreal was pretty, you know, not that far away. It was only a month ago, but still, it's progress. You know, and then TING Open, this group, I think I would give him first place. I think actually in the qualifier, he did face a Protoss that was giving some other Zergs trouble. And Zanster was going to slap him down, or maybe we expected him to and he didn't. I'm not quite remembering how that went down. All right, TING has been a lot of groups, a lot of qualifiers. Well, 2 qualifiers, but a lot of groups, a lot of setup, certainly a lot of games. We get to see all of these guys in our weeklies, Corsairs, Lima Leagues, you name it. So sometimes the games are lost in my memory. But anyways, as I said, I think if he's on point today, then he's going to take first. Goblin's gonna have something to say about that. He did open up with a Stargate into 2 gateways. No extremely greedy third base like you can see off the back of a Stargate opener. Zanster has not seen the Stargate quite yet, but sees that the front, there's a Toilet Council or Robo, for instance, where a lot of Protoss players, there's no Terran here today, a lot of Protoss players don't even mind putting down in plain sight. But still, seeing the Oracle fly by would be the nicest thing. Because, hey, they could have a Twilight Council researching over there, for instance. So this is going to be able to see the Stargate before it dies. The Stalker opener ensures the death, whereas a lot of other Protosses, I think, forgo that Stalker. Just go for the Adepts to even pair up with the Oracle. And as such, the Overlord is to sit on top of a bunch of things and do whatever it wants. See what exactly is coming out of the Stargate follow-up. Because you see the Stargate, you see the Oracle, well, that's grand. You build the Spore Crawlers. But, of course, a lot of people talking about Mass Oracles. You want to see if there's a Void Ray follow-up. You want to see if there's a Phoenix follow-up. You want to see if there's a Stargate follow-up to a Stargate. And now with that Stalker, you won't be able to. Lings do scout the timing of the third base, which is expected. Hardly any shenanigans based off of Stargate openers nowadays. This Oracle also has a scouting job to do. Wants to see exactly what Zanster's plans are. Generally, we expect Ling, Baneling, Hydra, and I'm sure that's what Goblin is expecting, but you have some Zergs that likes to build a lot of Lings and try and tear down this third base. Not so much anymore. Protosses have gotten too good at having units in position ready to go. But even so, a couple like Ling Baneling attacks can definitely surprise an opponent. How fast are they getting to Hydras? Are they getting to Hydras? Or are they going for something weird like a really fast Infestation Pit? It is a double Stargate follow-up, but what's interesting here from Goblin is that he immediately slaps down the Twilight Council on a Forge, which seems awfully quick. You know, his third base really wasn't the most, the fastest or the most powerful third base I've ever seen, where he's transferring 20 probes there already, you know? So his economy is decent. We usually don't see everything added at once. It's usually maybe one Stargate. Yeah, that would make more sense. Maybe it's 2 Stargates total and this, but 3 Stargates and charge, usually charge, with +1. Well, that's a lot to afford. I'm not sure how that's gonna look. 2 Oracles are constantly getting back here and checking to see if there's going to be an abrupt attack that they're not expecting. Is it really just going to be waiting for the Hydras? And it is. Zanster is going to have to wait for his Hydras. But double, triple checking. Unfortunately, stays a little bit too long. That weak Oracle does get shot down. One is still alive. And of course, is going to be met up soon with a bunch more of his buddies. Well, her buddies, I guess. It is charge, which is kind of expected, although Blink seems to be making a bit of a comeback as a follow-up. That's a very interesting just thing that seems to be happening for some Protoss players, which I don't... We saw it from Neeb, for instance, against Scarlet at Kings of the North, but that was because she went from Mutas. But it's almost like because more Zerg players are riding on that Spire, we might see more Protoss players experiment with Blink follow-ups. Zanster not prescribing to the Spire method, though, did just go for the old standard Baneling Hydra. Really doesn't get this Oracle. Has an Overseer finally scout everything, including the Stargates and the Twilight Council and Forge. Forge ends up not being used, although I guess it also provides cannons. You don't usually see cannons this early. So I still am kind of curious about triple Stargate, not just double, but triple Stargate with the immediate addition of charge and +1. Like, I'm still like, is that really something you should be affording right now? And, oh, well, who knows? Maybe Goblin is like, no, I really wanted that Forge. It's gonna go for shields. That's interesting. Shields affecting both air and ground can sometimes be the cooler upgrade to have. I got this wrong last time, so I'm not gonna say this with confidence, but the shield upgrade is a more expensive upgrade. I just can't remember what it is right off the top of my head. 150, 150? And then 170, 175, 200, 200? I don't remember. But attack and armor both 100, so definitely cheaper. But that's the takeaway, right? You get to improve almost everything in the Protoss arsenal when you research shield, including, for instance, these mass oracles you're going for. I would say seeing that fast of a charge, not paired up, like not a actual transfer into charge lot, Archon, Storm. You know, obviously Goblin is still making oracles here, is kind of almost like a safety measure in my opinion. Like, they are going to help against the Hydras, they are going to help against the Lings, but if Zanster makes any amount of Banelings, you don't have the Archons or the Storms to help out. The Oracles have to do a fine job dealing with it. Zanster brings some Queens along, escorting these Overlords, and especially with Transfuses, the Oracles don't have a chance, but to be honest, I'm not sure they had a chance before the Queens came into play. That was so many Hydras, and the Zealots really didn't do squat for help. Zanster is simply overpowering Goblin, who doesn't have the answer here. He doesn't have enough Oracles, enough Charge Lots. He doesn't have Splash from Storm. I think he's just dead. The awesome addition of the Queens, like, I'd love to talk about that for days, but honestly, I think it was just the Hydra bust. Zanster got to a decent economy, wasn't really harassed, and chewed through the Zealots like nothing, and then the Oracles weren't so bad to deal with after that. They're just stutter step away from the Zealots. You can see in combination, the Zealots and the Oracles do a lot of damage, just isn't enough. Too many Hydras coming out here, and Zanster takes game number 1 against Goblin, who we have always known as an Oracle user, but for some reason, as soon as Oracles became the thing to do, he actually backed off from it, which is so weird to see. Now back on the Oracle train, Zanster clearly expected that and dealt with it very easily. A lot of times you see people go for any type of Oracle play, whether it's, you know, 1, then 3 Stargates, or, you know, 2 and then 3, like whatever. They insist on Oracles, or they insist on transferring over to Charged Archon. The point is, we see a lot of really great players use this style, however they choose to use it. Koreans, Europeans, North Americans. And you'll watch the Hydra busts happen, and you'll be like, well, you know, Oracles are bullshit. charge lots and storms are bullshit. He had to make the Hydras to deal with the Oracles. How is this even going to work? And Infestors are really the way that it's going to work. But Zanster didn't need to wait for his Infestors. He just really overpowered with pure number. I bring it up just as I guess like a warning. As Goblin, okay, maybe Goblin shouldn't have taken that 4th base nearly as quickly. He probably should have laid a lot more stasis traps. His Oracles probably should have been more aggressive. Say he does all of these things, and Zanster tries another Hydra bust, another Hydra break. Well, then maybe that's when Zanster looks foolish. So, bit of, I guess, potential excitement for the next game. It's gonna be a Abyssal Reef, but I'm hoping this isn't just going to be a stomp 3-0 because Zanster knows exactly how to deal with Goblin. I'm saying that Goblin still has a really good shot to even use the same style and catch Zanster off guard. But the Oracles really weren't as scary as they usually are. Players are ready to go. I will not be holding anyone up today, so let's do it. Abyssal Reef. Under the sea. Here we are in Abyssal Reef. In the top left, down 1. He is the pink Protoss Goblin. In the bottom right, as the red Zerg, he is Zanster. So Zanster dealt with Oracles like a pro. Mass Hydra just made it look easy. But this guy doesn't have to play a macro game, and I would say a lot of the times I don't expect Zanster to play a macro game. You'd be wondering why I bring this up, other than just setting, I guess, the storyline for Zanster. I'm bringing it up more specifically because Zanster has done this on Abyssal Reef before, and this is a cheesy maneuver he's about to do here. It doesn't look that way because you look at the production tab and you see a hatchery, a gas, and a pool on the way, all in the order of things you would expect. So what's the difference? Well, Zanster went for the double gas steal, or steal, gas trick. That's what we call it, the gas trick. Because he was actually capped for so much longer at 15 than normal. All of these things that he put down are 2 or 3 drones ahead of the norm. This makes it very hard to scout and tell what his plans are as the Protoss player, because what, you're gonna tell he has 3 less drones? Like, I don't think so. I'm not even sure, honestly, how they scout this. But I imagine it's the same way they scout a regular Ling all-in, because this is what it's going to lead to for Zanster, at least it has in the past. He goes for a Ling all-in, and then if that doesn't work, he adds on the Evolution Chamber and goes for the Overlord drops. The way you scout that is simply just scouting a lack of 3rd base. But some Protosses go in there, see that it's not an early pool, leave, and then they play their own little game. They don't care about the follow-up. They figure, I'm gonna have a wall, I'm gonna have a Stargate, like even if he does Ling flood me, I'm gonna be prepared. But I think the just tiniest little bit of timing difference that Zanster does catches Zerg's or Protosses off guard. So when they think, oh, my soccer has time to chase down this Overlord, it really doesn't. And that is #1 fear here. Goblin is going into what can consider be an okay opener against any Ling Flood. Stargate can definitely help, but the Stalker is not going to block. There's 2 holes anyways, and might be chasing an Overlord that Zanster should really just be, I think, now using to distract the Stalker. He is getting an Evolution Chamber, but another Overlord won't be coming for quite some time. This one's going to be very slow, and that probably, I would say, wasn't even intentional, because Zanster did not trick Goblin into sending that Stalker away. So it is plugging the hole, but there are so many Lings here. They're about to have speed. Something is going to get torn down, and Goblin needs to buy a lot of time. Militia Core was instantly made once he realized what was happening, and an Oracle might have to pop out to help, but he's not building it quite yet. 1 overcharge forces Zanster to leave, and because he lost that Overlord, there's no extra access into the base. I think Zanster messing up his build a little bit here, missed opportunity. Goblin thinking, okay, I dealt with that, no problem. Fine. Thinking himself in a fine position. Even trying to get out a sentry right now. That was only 1 photon overcharge. Another one won't be ready for quite some time. Double layer wall has to come down from Goblin. Pylon breaks. It's already very, very low. Second pylon is about to break, but there are so many pylons that, you know, one of the worries, of course, is that something will be depowered. Nothing so far has been depowered. The 7x score is getting awfully low, but it looks like Warp Gate will finish just in the nick of time. The Sentry buys a little bit more time, a little bit more damage as well by forcing itself into the gateways. 2 Warp Gates finish up, but is that going to be enough? The Oracle shows herself, just by showing herself, and Zanster has to back off. This Overlord is hit into a drop, but a probe is watching. The pylon will distract. It will eventually provide a way to overcharge. And so far, Goblin is doing a fantastic job dealing with Zanster's aggression. Lots of lanes are still left over, but this is definitely an all-in that has yet to work. Zanster continuing to all-in because there really is no other option. Taking a third base and trying to drone at this point in time would just keep you way too far behind in the game. So follow up all-in and hope that Goblin makes a mistake, undervalues the potential of Ling drops, perhaps. But with now 2 Oracles and a Phoenix on the way to take care of the 1 extra problem, the drop Overlord, I don't see how Zanster's going to make this work. And just trying to break through, but there's, you know, there could be even another layer of walls. This is a wall right here. GG. Well done by Goblin. Zanster looking to continue his momentum from that Hydra break that made the game look so easy into, you know, an earlier pool, earlier hatch build. You win that 2-0 instantly in the third game, which is going to be so tough for Goblin to come back mentally. The Goblin dealt with that as perfectly as you possibly can. Now that takes us into game 3, which is going to be on Odyssey. But first, quick 2-minute break, guys. Thanks for watching. Be back soon. Almost timed out perfectly. No map intro for Odyssey, so we're getting right into the game. Game number 3 all tied up. In the top left, he's the blue Zerg. It's Zanster, Precise Storm Gaming. In the bottom right, as the pink Protoss, it is Goblin, Red Blood Pro. Very nice defense from Goblin there. Getting his momentum back by dealing with that cheesy little opener. I'm still not sure there's a direct, obvious way of seeing what Zanster is doing. Maybe you know he likes doing that on the map. Maybe there is a way to tell, like, hey, that gas is just a little too fast. Which might be the case. Certainly you can click on an opponent's gas and see that it's already a little bit too far gone. But, as I said, I think the proper way is just to hold it like you would any Ling attack you had to scout, whether it's a little bit earlier or not. Scout the third base, have a wall ready to go, don't get caught off guard, be prepared for the chance that it is an all-in, and then when you realize, hey, it's a Ling all-in, continue walling off, keeping a steady head, having oracles, thinking about the Overlord drop, not getting surprised by that. And that's exactly what Goblin did. You know, he didn't let a lot of it get to him. He tried to be calm and produce as many walls as possible. His Stalker wasn't baited away, which I thought was a missed opportunity from Zanster. But hey, maybe Goblin was aware of that potential and also would not have let his Stalker chase it too far. I don't know. I'm actually more curious if I was going to ask any one of these players a question. I wouldn't ask Goblin, like, hey, did you know what he was doing? Have you seen this build before? I would ask Zanster, hey, did you really mean to send that Overlord in like that? He'd probably say yeah, because generally that isn't a depth opener. Most Protosses open up with the depths, not Stalkers. When they open up with a Stalker, I would say that's a little bit suspicious, actually. You know, what are you trying to hide type of thing. But Goblin opened up the Stalker the first game, so if that was Zanster just having a habit, like, oh, he's never going to chase down that Overlord, well, that was a bad time to have that habit. And once again, Goblin is going for a Stalker. Someone asked in chat also about the probe mineral stealer that it is. Obviously stole some minerals, but you can really maximize the use of your probe by stopping the drone stacking. This is really advanced stuff. Honestly, if you want to do it as someone in Platinum or Gold League, well then feel free, because it's kind of just an APM waster in the beginning of the game, but it is technically beneficial. You stack your drones on the nearest mineral patches, but if your opponent sees that and starts mining from, like, for instance, this one, these drones won't stack anymore, leaving them a little less cost efficient. And then you steal the minerals and get out of there. And if it ever comes down to a base race, There are 5 minerals less and you win the game. Or something. Soccer was going to try and chase down the Overlord long before it got into the base, and it already did so much damage that Zanster has to be very careful. Like, it probably will not get the scout it's looking for. Unless Goblin, for some reason, had his tech all the way over here, which doesn't make any sense. Accidentally made a Twilight Council, maybe, there? I don't know. There was something with gas that got canceled. But meant to build a robo. It is a fast charge all in. This is really important, guys. If it's resonating glaives, I think that there's that chance it doesn't lead so much to an all in as it does to like a slower third base and a different game than you expect because so many games of the Stargate. But with charge, yeah, I can't imagine it going any other way other than additional gateways. He even kind of like faked these 2 gases as opposed to the Lings had not tried stopping the Stalker and had just run simply past it. He still wouldn't have been able to quite tell what's going on. He might have thought that it was, in fact, resonating glaives, but now this is just 1 gas, or 1 probe in each gas. Overlord, Seeky Overlord, full health one gets in here and sees a ton of gateways. This is really important that Zanster had a second one already prepared to go because this one was too weak, simply put. Baneling Nest is on the way. Zanster knows what's up, but the Baneling Nest has to be used in a very cautious way. Whether it's a depth or a charge, by the way, I don't think he really has to know which one it is, although the guess probably is charge. Banelings will help. But I say that be used in a cautious way because maybe you build 10 Banelings right off the bat, and that sounds like a really good number. You kill the first wave of charge lots and you think, well, that was really good. But then you realize, I don't have a lot of gas as a Zerg player because I usually don't have to take more than 1 or keep my guys in gas. And you only build 2 Banelings after that. Lings are not that great against charge lots. You need a lot of them or are going to need backup either by queens or more importantly Banelings. So even if the snowball effect initially looks terrible for Goblin, you always got to be a little bit worried. Like, did I really stop this in its tracks? Goblin getting a couple of more zealots, not just running in face first without another warp in, but is running in face first now. Face check in the bushes. Oh god. Does split the last second, and Zanster wisely chooses not to use his Banelings. He wants that really nice clump up. And if he doesn't get it, then a surround on a couple of zealots isn't bad either. Queens are coming in here to help as well, and they are not getting damaged. They're also not targeting the Warp Prism, but they're not getting damaged. They're holding on transfuses. Zanster just continuing to make as many Lings as possible at this stage in the game. He is going to potentially run out of Larva, which is another big deal. But he's actually just continuing to make queens, so even if he did run out of larva, his queens are going to be okay defense as well. When you have like 10 of them, they can help. Warp Prism is the key to this attack, but I'm afraid Goblin has already been stopped. The scout was huge. The perfect defense was huge. You know, not underestimating the charge lot all in. I kind of like what this Goblin's going to do here. Not just going to tap out, which, honestly might be called for with how badly this was stopped. He's going to go for a follow-up with Archons. Archons, you know, Zanster thinks, oh, charge lots, that's easy, and blitz all his Banelings explode on Archons. Well, maybe then Goblin's attack works, but... Takes a third base. I still don't really think this is going to be for a real macro game, although, hey, it could be. Maybe he just brings his Warp Prism... or uses Warp Prism as harassment and tries to probe as hard as possible. I'm still thinking more of a follow-up, but we'll see. Zanster, he had to make so many Lings, so many Banelings, and so many Queens. How many Queens is he up to? 10 Queens right now. 7 of them just, you know, running around trying to catch that Warp Prism. Doesn't really have a bad economy to reflect that. You know, he was at, I think, like 40-ish when the attack started, and then he realized he had it on lockdown, so he made drones. He's making even more. Gets a gold base. The chance, like, whatever Goblin is doing, whether it's a follow-up attack with this third base not really truly being saturated, or it is an attempt at a macro game, I don't really think it's gonna work. So... this Warp Prism would have to be the best Warp Prism ever. You know, distracting and killing and never dying. Key thing is never dying. I don't think it's gonna do that. They got Lair done, Hydralis down on the way, Centrifugal Hooks on the way. He just got a scout, I think, on the High Templars warping in, so knows that it is the Archon follow-up. Goblin is building probes, so this was not just an attempt at faking a third base or only using the gases. Oh, maybe it was. May spoke a little too soon. He only got the 54 probes, enough to half saturate the minerals, but more importantly enough to get as many gas geysers up as possible. All right, yeah, 2 gateways already added, and he stopped probes. So that follow-up all-in said that the Archons can be kind of crazy, but Zanster, having so far a perfect game, could lose a couple of drones, could even lose a base. As long as he builds the appropriate amount of units, he's going to need a lot of Lings and Hydras, and his Banelings are going to have to try and connect as you know, good as possible. Looked a little weird, but he was looking for feedbacks. I don't know if that was really that important, but Charge lots try their best not to run headfirst, and the Banelings end up failing, ultimately. And this is defended once again. GG. Zanster with the textbook hold against Goblin's build, much as Goblin's hold against Zanster's build was pretty textbook. So, I don't want to say these guys are evenly matched, just that coincidentally they both won games by just appropriate, the most appropriate reaction you can think of. Some people, I would say, do try and go for roaches, which is just like really questionable against that attack because you only get so many roaches and the charge lots still overwhelm. That's one big fear of going roaches. Or they try and run Lings in, so they don't have enough Lings at home. That's another way you might see people try and stall out the push. There are different ways to doing that, but the way that Zanster did it, I think, is really good. Especially with the queens. Because if, you know, say there wasn't enough Lings at one point, those queens could have tanked for a long time with that many transfuses. Next up's going to be Mech Depot. Could be the last one of the series. Zanster being up 2-1. I believe we got a sub during one of the breaks. Yes, we did. Thank you to Kalmanak for the new sub. Big thank you. Players are in the game. Alright, let's get into Mech Depot. Keep putting the obs screen way too far to the left. Alright, here we go. Game number 4 in the bottom left. With only 1 point on the board, he is Goblin. In the top right, with 2 points on the board, nearing completion of the series, it is System Gaming's Zanster. Guy that I said I do believe could take first in his group, but in the winners match would be Denver, who just kind of slapped down sort of in a ZvZ 3-0. I don't really know what I'd put Zanster's best matchup as. He's still not someone I see all the time that I could definitively say one or the other, and he still participates in a lot more European things than anything else, so I really can't tell his versus Terran either. The only Terran we really have playing nowadays seems to be Hero Marine. And a couple of others that are up-and-comers, sure. I'm not remembering right now, but yeah, mostly Hero Marine. But anyways, I would say, from what I've seen, his ZvP looks quite impressive, as long as he's on his game, scouting. Not getting too surprised. And I think any European Zerg, right, you gotta be scared of their ZvZ, but then that's like a weird conundrum, because if everyone in Europe is good at ZvZ, then who's bad at ZvZ? Anyways, that'll be for the future. I mean, Goblin can still bring it back. You know, he got 1 game under his belt. Zanster tried to end it a little too soon, didn't work out, and Goblin, well, 3rd game tries and all, and that doesn't work. Okay, back to the macro game. That first game was a macro game. He went for the Mass Oracle. There's definitely a couple of things that could have gone better for him, and by a couple, I mean a lot of things that could have gone better for him. Maybe he's thinking about that and thinking, you know what, I can just fix that. I still got a chance in a macro game against Zanster. But Zanster is a very scary guy at this point in time. One of those guys that I think everyone's been looking at is kind of like, well, if he could put a lot of work into it, again, like being in school, then he would be one of the best, but just has had couple of different circumstances where he hasn't really been able to do that. Maybe next year. Maybe next year will be really, truly his year, winning WCSs and all that. He certainly had an impressive group at Montreal, but didn't really have an impressive run, so gotta be waiting for next year. Or WESG? I'm honestly not following really who's getting into WESG. All I'm following is the drama that happens, like Norway and Finland having to share a spot or something. Like, alright. It is going to be Stargate Opener again. Zanster is going for a typical expansion process, nothing too scary over there. Goblin would want to scout that to be absolutely sure, but because he opens up with a Stalker, he really can't. Just real quick, I keep mentioning like a lot of pro rosters open up with Adepts. And perhaps that's a question as to why, like, the Stalker is able to kill the Overlord. Isn't that really fantastic? Well, I think, first and foremost, we saw last game, sometimes they can't. So is it really useful? And then other points to be said is that they can't really be aggressive. Not like an Adept can. An Adept gets into a tricky spot. Hopefully they've already sent out a Shade and are ready to get out of it. It gets into a tricky spot. Hopefully they've already sent a Shade out to at least scout before they die. They get into a tricky spot. Well, they complement with Oracles really well, so they just try and die slowly so the Oracles have a time to... Like, the Stalker just can't do all of that. The Stalker would get surrounded by 4 Lings and do the little, like, wiggle AI thing and die. It'd be pretty useless. So it's definitely a different dynamic. There's, one utility that the Stalker can do that the Adepts can, that's shoot up. But is it really worth getting? Especially every single game. Because, Zanster starts to read into this. He tries the all-in, which he did, and it didn't work. Okay, that's, 1 point against what I'm saying, but he reads into this and just is like, well, I just don't have to worry about you being really aggressive. Like, you're never going to follow up with a Adept attack. And your Oracles didn't really do a lot of damage the first time, so I'm just going to do a lot of droning. Which, in that first game, the macro one, he got up to 77 drones really quickly. Goblin never got a chance to do much harassment with any amount of Oracles, which I think was problem 1 of other things. Amongst other things. But their next is on the way, and Goblin is going for +1 air weapons, and not triple Stargate, but double with a fleet beacon. So, carriers already on the way. Can be a dangerous thing to do. Oracles, building Oracles first, they're silly. You always need to underestimate how many Hydras or Queens Oracles can kill when they get into counts of 6 or 7. But they also can fly around and harass. So while you're building your carrier fleet at home, 20 Oracles are keeping the Hydras chasing after them, making you go into infestors, whatever. If you just go into carriers, you have literally 1 Oracle, and that's it. Not even any Adepts to try and throw Zanster off. So Zanster, hopefully, is going to scout this. Number 1, probably just turn this into Overseer eventually and get in there. And then when he sees it, he might try and Hydra bust again. The real trick about dealing with carriers, I think, is not that, like any direct unit composition, although anything that shoots up, right? It's more, I think, that you have to catch them in a good position. When they're low counts, mass Hydras will kill enough interceptors, so that's one thing, but another thing is if the carriers have to go out here into the middle of the map, well then that's when a concave of Hydra and Queens is like awesome. If they're stuck here and your Hydras are getting all derpy on the ramp, well then 4 carriers is suddenly boss mode. So we do have the scout from the Overseer. I'm bringing up all these hypotheticals and how this game could go. What we generally see is complications with carriers first, but it really depends on how Zanster wants to take this. Zanster has, had to play a normal ZvP up until this point, 6 minutes, so it's not like he already has 40 Hydras and just is like, well, that was a coincidence, I'm just going to attack right now. What he does have is a superpowered economy and 74 drones and 4 bases, and the potential to make a lot of Hydras very, very quickly. He also did make a good number of Queens, possibly expecting Oracles, but now that he's seen that it's quick carriers, doesn't mind using those for that purpose either. I'm gonna admit I've never quite seen people be aggressive with the first 2 carriers. The recall makes a lot of sense as to why you could be, but because it's only 2 carriers, the interceptors just got slaughtered. And while they're not as many minerals as they once were, or as few minerals as they once were, they went through stupid changes. That seems a bit of a waste. Because now if you recall, you're going to be recalling carriers to a potentially dangerous position, and they're not going to have a lot of interceptors. So I don't know about this. I feel like certainly Zanster's got to be a little bit scared at how many Queens and Hydras are already available. He's going to continue trying to buy time, and I've, again, never seen carriers used as if they were Oracles, but that's kind of what they're doing here. Zanster going for pretty much the same bust he did against Mass Oracles, and I can see it working for both. The carrier count is still growing. It'll take a long time to make, so we're up to 4 already, with a couple of upgrades, maybe? 30 more seconds on this one. 2 more carriers on the way. Coronabu's going all into the Stargate production. He realizes that same bust is going to happen soon. He wants as many units as possible. He's barely going to have any ground support. Cannons is a good move, but they're going to be a little bit late to the party. 4th base seems like an awfully bold thing to try and save here. Queens coming forward, not all the Hydras, some of them are lacking, but Queens come forward and just transfuse through the Interceptors. Hydras now can come forward and get the rest of them. Creep even being spread as a beautiful addition to the Drop Overlord. One of the big problems is getting out microed, especially with the Queens, but even with the Hydras, carriers run away, attack, and you lose a ton of Hydras just chasing after. This creep spread is going to give a lot of advantage to Zanster that he's not supposed to have. Trying to bust up this ramp. This is that one complication I was talking about. The Hydras maybe not be plentiful enough for the Interceptors. There's quite a few carriers. Another one pops out, trying their best to build as many Interceptors as possible. They do have Graviton Catapult. The upgrade did finish. They're at 2-1 right now. Zanster currently at 1-1. His Queens run out of transfuses, but they are still providing that healthy body, basically, to charge forward into the cannons to soak up maybe some of the Interceptors. And Zanster is just rattling. He's also expanding to a 5th and a 6th. In that supercharged economy at 78 drones. Gets the 4th base, is looking to get the 3rd. Interceptors once again released here to attack, but the carriers are obviously running low. They can kill a lot of the Hydras, but now the Queens are left over and they can still try and take on the carriers. They can do that too. The strong, independent woman. That their X is going to go down, and Goblin not able to make carriers work. Couldn't make the Oracles work either against this bust. It just seems like a very strong build from Zanster. Especially when you know that you can do this, I think. You know, like there's a bit of a hard counter already going into Zanster's plan when he's facing Goblin in a macro game, it seems. You know, already having 9 Queens, that's usually not what happens in this matchup. But if you think they're going to go Mass Stargate, more power to you. Do it as fast as possible. Once again on this ramp, a perfect opportunity for the carriers to just stay over high grounds. Carriers not being target fired are losing the Interceptors even still. Usually after a certain point, right, if you're just trading up for Interceptors, that's not enough. You know, the carriers start to get into higher numbers like 10, not just 4 or 5. And that number with full Interceptors is too much for Hydras. So initially, the couple of fights with Interceptors were dying and going very well. Well, maybe could have still been recovered from Goblin, but loses 2 carriers going way too far forward onto Creep, which is a funny thing to say because it's his side of the map, but that's what happened. But my point I was getting into still kind of stands, where you could see that because the carrier count had grown, even though they were both on like all of them rather were on like half Interceptors, there just was too many. And Zanster maybe even regretted for a second not trying harder to kill the carriers. Now, the carriers are flying forward here, looking for an opportunity, but I'm not sure it's really going to exist. That Revelation didn't even get cast. 7 carriers is still not super scary against what could be a max out Zerg army. We know it's not. Goblin doesn't quite. Zanster also is finishing his upgrades. He's going to have 2-2 in just a couple of seconds right now. Interceptors once again being the primary target. It's hard to call them a target because you actually really can't target fire them, but the intention is to kill as many Interceptors as possible, and Zanster did not mind doing that. Yeah, it's always great to get the actual carrier, but if you know you can take on the Interceptors, then do it. Goblin can barely afford to make more carriers, so in addition to that, they're rebuilding all of these Interceptors off of what was only 2 bases for the longest time. 3rd base still under construction. Yeah, he's not going to be adding any other units soon. Definitely not Charge or Archons or hell, even more probes. The second Hydra attack should be the nail in the coffin, especially with the better upgrades. Cancel on the 3rd base, and Goblin is just hoping that carriers really are as OP as they can seem. Now to count back up to 9 after losing 3. 1 or 2 of them are weak. But Zanster, having also expanded behind the initial attack, really shouldn't be running out of Hydras anytime soon. If he had maybe thought he was going to win, that's certainly a problem. And in fact, we see here, this many carriers is giving Zanster a problem. Every time he attacks in here thinking that he can remax, and he's just shy of that, which he is, again, only at 150 supply, that's a chance that Goblin runs forward, rebuilds all the interceptors, and carriers are shockingly good. This is a danger. Zanster needs to be careful, and in fact, he realizes it. He realizes that if I attack right now, that I might just lose too many Hydras, and then he'll snowball to victory. The momentum will be too strong. Zanster might have expanded a ton to continue reinforcing with Hydras, but perhaps he should have added on some tech as well. But on creep, Zanster gets underneath these carriers and target fires them this time. I believe 2 more just went down. But every time that he can't do that, every time the carriers are over that awkward high ground terrain, that's when Goblin gets the better trade. And now Zanster is forced into his natural, where it gets even more awkward. Spore Crawler is helping out, but Zanster's going to start rallying from really weird locations and might just start losing them, you know, being rallied. I don't think he has enough Hydra. Zanster might just end up losing to the carriers anyways, despite the strong push that killed 2 bases. And Goblin still being only on 2 bases. I guess there was a Hydra counter that he killed 17 probes for, but it was a very small one. And he still can't deal with the carriers. I think Zanster just lost this game. Zanster now at third of the supply. Carriers had no trouble remaking the interceptors. What do they cost now? I didn't actually check chat when I mentioned that. Is it 5 or 10 or 15? I think it'd be cheaper, right? Well, point is, since he wasn't losing the carriers, it wasn't that, what are they, like 300, 200? That wasn't the investment, right? It was the investment in just interceptors and a couple more carriers. But, you know, eventually, the carrier count got too large. And even though like, how many interceptors have been killed? Let's actually check this out. No, that's structures, my bad. 425 interceptors have been killed. I guess the fact is, only 7 carriers over 15 minutes had been killed, so with 9 left, there we go. With 9 left, that was still enough to overpower Zanster's Hydra army, which would never get quite to max. Yeah, I think that was another problem. Either because Goblin would counter or Zanster thought he had a winning move, he would attack sub 200, and he would die out to the carrier interceptors. What a crazy game, and one that Zanster is not willing to let go of. He is probably feeling super frustrated right now, was expanding all over the place. He had a ton of money, he had a ton of economy. He should have been able to win out against carriers, but that wasn't true. And Goblin even has set up a couple of defenses here. Whatever minerals he had left over, he put into cannons. And he did, in fact, run out of minerals in his mana natural. Can a base trade actually work? I'm really not sure about this. And I can see the resources lost. Zanster is almost doubling. Yeah, more than doubling. Goblins, and that's really the story here. Zanster must be feeling very, very frustrated. This is his army. And it can't even take on 4 carriers. GG! Goblin ties up the series, and we're gonna go to an ace match. Shocking, as it is. That's the way the cookie crumbles, I guess. So, with that, last map's going to be Interloper. Real quick though, 2-minute break. See you soon. Unbelievably, it is the ace match. In the bottom right has the pink Protoss. It's Goblin. In the top left has the red Zerg. He's Zanster. Seemingly had the answer to mass air, whether it was oracles or carriers. Certainly the start of that last game looked like he did. And then he did it. Thank you to Daisiode. That's how I like saying his name. For the continued bit support. That was a pretty cray-cray game. people saying, you know, well, Zanster played poorly, or definitely should have teched up more, something that I also mentioned during that game, but can you really blame him for thinking that he had that on lockdown? I think probably the second or third time the Hydras had to back off or got killed, that's probably when Zanster was like thinking, wait a second, can carriers really do this? And, well, just thought that he just needed to wait a little bit more. We saw his patience start to emerge when he backed off from his 4th, realizing that, hey, maybe 150 supply of Hydras is not going to be enough. So I think there was some realization there that, like, oh god, carriers are going to be able to do it. But it was too late, and that led shortly to the 3rd and then the natural falling down. So, you know, had he realized it sooner, there was probably going to be an attempt to go into infestors, an old parasite, or fungals, or even corruptors, something like that. The real problem for a lot of those fights was what I highlighted at the very beginning of the game. And especially on Mech Depot, where that high ground and impassable terrain, except for air, existed, right? Between the natural and the 3rd base. That's a really strong spot for carriers and tempests. And every time Zanster tried to break into the natural to really KO his opponent, that's when he lost the majority of his Hydras when he started to snowball. And that stopped his momentum right then and there. So, mistakes certainly were made. Zanster, understandably, probably frustrated from that. Interlope is a very different map, though. While Mech Depot is doesn't look the biggest, it is, until you break down the rocks, one of the longer maps. So maybe reinforcements could have arrived a little bit sooner, and that would have been able to give Zanster the win. That's something that could happen in Interloper. And to that point, Goblin will probably be less likely to go into fast carriers here. Stalker has to deal with the Lings, which, hey, it can. Some good micro coming out. But they're always going to be able to get into the main base and see that it is a Twilight Council. Now, this isn't the same. This is what I was talking about is normal. When we saw the charge out all in. You go with charge, and very rarely does it lead into a macro game. You go with Resident Enclave Adepts, and that's usually just additional 2, maybe 3, maybe even 4 gateways, going up to 5. But not 7 gateways super all in. Or 8, or whatever it was. So, you see here, so far it's only 2 additional ones. So, very expansion-y aggression. Best description ever. Now, that's something that Zanster would want to double-check, though, right? As he did get charged out all in. She'd love to see that it is, in fact, only 2 gateways at the front. And nothing more. But perhaps he just sees the timing and is thinking, nah, it's gonna be just the Adepts. Because he's not sending this Overlord in at all. Oh, there we go. Either way, okay, so now he's sending the Overlord in, alright. He is getting a Baneling Nest. Now, I guess really, to the true technical degree, you don't need a Baneling Nest against a Resident Enclave's attack if you have enough Lings, but that's like catching them while they're still in transit. That, you know, and if you don't do that, then your Lings are in trouble. So Banelings are the much safer move. But upon realizing that this was in fact just the triple gateway expansion build, well, eventual expansion build, Zanster is just getting into his droning. He is going to scout the double Stargate follow-up, which is quite common nowadays. And see that a Void Ray is going to pop out first. Lair's on the way, drones are on the way, there it is. And in fact, Goblin might not even go for the attack. I think you have to try, right? You have to at least send the Adepts forward and then show them and then shade them maybe even backwards, but still show them. Because certainly having something on the ground when you're going into Stargate is helpful. You got Resident Enclaves and that many Adepts for a reason. And just keeping them at home would seem like a little bit of a waste. On the flip side, sending them into their death to Banelings is also a waste, so hopefully the shades will not complete. Well, they will not. Third target being added on, and while that Void Ray was initially created, it was cancelled. And it is, in fact, Mass Oracles, which, I don't know, if his intention was to trick Zanster and thinking it's some kind of weird Mass Void Ray thing, I don't think Zanster would be tricked. He might be, you know, sending his Overlords away, thinking like, oh god, he's gonna kill him, but, yeah, Mass Void Rays isn't really a thing so much. So one thing that was really missing, that carrier game was mass Stargate play, technically, but that's not the same as what we saw in the very first game, which was mass Oracle. That first game, they just didn't get much damage done with them. They lived, but they got, you know, what they're getting right now, which is like 4 drones, which is not that impressive. And Zanster was able to get to 4 bases, 70 plus drones, which he's already at, and go for that Hydra Queen bust. If Goblin had maybe been more aggressive with other units, maybe he had the Resident Enclave Adepts to send in, maybe his Oracles, took down the 4th base before there was, because this is probably the most obvious thing you could get, right? There's a lack of creep spread over here, and Hydras wouldn't be made yet, and he could have done significant damage to the 4th base, but he just kind of lets it go. Also a supply block, which is pretty bad. Really bad. So that's what I'm paying attention to. Does he deal good damage? But it looks like Zanster is thinking of a Spire, not that Queen Hydra thing, although he's getting a lot of queens. That is for the initial defense, I would guess. And I do believe he's going to go for Mutas first. As long as the Spire isn't scouted, I think is the trick to it. Where is that Spire? That's it. Even I was deceived. Let's look at the Spire. So, will that Spire get scouted? You know, with a billion Oracles, you really feel like everything would get scouted, but because they're looking for damage and they're looking for units, a lot of times they aren't focusing on scouting. So they miss the main base entirely, or even the natural. So the Spire going unscouted here, you go for Mutas, you fly them across the short map that is Interloper, you Overseer sees that there's really only one pylon powering some very important Stargates. I think you build as many Mutas as you can, and start that ball rolling. Whatever he builds right now is going to have to help out with this. Adepts do shade in, Oracles come in as well, the Queens missing the transfuses here are actually getting destroyed by them, and it's a good thing that he went for a Spire, because he absolutely needs something that isn't on the ground. It is going to be Corruptors. Canceling some of them? That's weird. It is going to be Corruptors, but I think that at the start, the Mutas still would have been strong. The Corruptors are going to be able to throw these Oracles for a loop, but they've already mostly died. What started off looking like a great attack has really generated into too many Oracles going down. 3 alive with barely any energy. And did they, again, scout that Spire? No, they did. No, they did. Okay. They didn't scout the Illusion Chambers. Barely seeing the Spire, but he doesn't quite know if there's Corruptors or not yet. Or did he see one pop? He might have saw one pop. But he's already on his way to Blink. He had already added a lot of gateways, as well as a 4th Stargate. Oh, more Oracles going down to the Corruptors. And I think this is because the Spire is becoming more and more of a common answer. We're going to see more and more tech swaps, right? So starting off with Hydras, then a Spire, or vice versa. Oh, Lings and Banelings is trying to destroy the ground army, which has no upgrades. That's pretty important to note. Goblin, I like that he followed up with Blink, but I don't like the lack of an upgrade here. The Banelings really didn't get the beautiful connections they were looking for on top of the Adepts, but they do have 1/1 just as Lings, and that's still scary. Corruptors can't help out, and Zanster is using every single resource to get his Ling army, Ling and Baneling army together. And that's just not many Stalkers. There's not a Warp Prism, but the map is small, so he's trying to build momentum with Warp-ins from his 4th base, and it's getting close to working. Zanster desperately trying to get as many Lings as possible, but has a larva problem right now. A lot of his Queens did die, and he certainly missed a couple of injects. He has dead weight in the air. These Corruptors aren't helping. I don't want to be like I told you so, but I am looking at these Corruptors kind of wishing that they were Mutas instead, because even having 12 Mutas while there were Stalkers, they would be able to help out and micro against this. Zanster is finally going to be able to use them on something. I don't even think go for the Oracles, right? Although they could help out. He could also try and counter, go for a base snipe, or even a couple pylon snipes with the Corruptors. Something, because they're not helping on the front lines. And the Queen goes down. Baneliness also is targeted. But Zanster's Lings are powerful. Again, no upgrades for our Protoss player. +1, only 75% done. +2, almost done for Zanster. 19 drones went down. Look at the 3rd base. There seems to be a lot of blood there. 4th base too. Yeah, Adept ran into the 4th base. So 20 drones went down. I was paying attention to the army fight. But is that enough? Zanster still finds himself at 56 drones. That's not terrible. Corruptor's finally doing some work here by going for the Nexus. One cannon might get one Corruptor. Not even. That Corruptor lives. The Nexus goes down. Zanster's already on a 5th base, and while his Larva was a problem when he was just getting Lings, now he's getting into Hydras. He's getting better upgrades, and his Queens finally get back to injecting. That is a lot of Adepts. Certainly more Banelings would make this easier to deal with. That Baneling Nest was killed, so it took him a little while, but that's going to be a lot. Definitely don't go for that Shaden. Corruptor's now looking for the 3rd base snipe, potentially. They'd only have 1 Photon Overcharge on them? Maybe 2. Oh, or none. Well, of course, killed. So, free Nexus, as the Warping was just used on a bunch more Adepts. Now, he's got 30 Adepts to 14 Banelings and 15 Hydras, but the Adepts are going to be clumped up, even as he tries to split here. That's pretty bad. And they do get demolished. Zanster very easily cleaning that up. GG. Close, though. Goblin had that moment where his momentum seemed to be almost on his side. The Larva being a problem, the Baneling Nest getting sniped. And if he had maybe better upgrades or just had consolidated a little bit more, maybe his Oracles had come in when the Corruptors were not looking or something along those lines, and maybe the momentum continues in his favor. But not the case, and Zanster does take the 3-2. So, in standard BaseTradeTV fashion, we'll be doing the losers match first. That's going to be Sorta versus Goblin. I don't know if Sorta is watching or anything like that. I'll probably have to contact him. Oh, seems like he's watching. So that'll be coming up next. They're going to do the vetoes. Denver isn't. I guess he's watching. I can't believe that Denver or Zanster won that. So yeah, that's going to have to happen. And it's going to be another best of 5. Whoever loses this upcoming match will should be out entirely. And the winners, of course, will be Zanster versus Denver. Getting back into that in a few minutes. First, talk about TING. Sponsoring this tournament and all that. TING Open Season 4. So we've had quite a few seasons where we actually managed to get people interested enough for 40 signups. Currently, I think we're at 9 out of 40. If we get 40 signups, that's a guaranteed Season 5. That is the ideal. So that would be awesome. You guys don't know what TING is. It's a mobile phone service company in the US. Just for the US. But if you're around Wi-Fi a lot, so you don't use a lot of data, then this is for you, because it gives really, really cheap options. I'll do the coin flip in a second. I'll get ready for this break. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't go away. In a couple minutes, we'll be going into the losers match.